nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Times ended up almost looking like a 6-3-1. Some very good writing about that on the Managing Madrid website. First-rate podcast as well. Of course, Fede Valverde was a huge part of the equation.
Hello and welcome to a Monday edition of the Managing Madrid Podcast. I am your host, Kiyan Sobhani. We are here for El Dia Después, the segment that is usually 2 days after and not 1 day after because Real Madrid played Saturday in this case. And Lucas Navarrete is here as always for this segment. We are going to talk about the game. We are going to talk about some injuries, rotations. We got a game tomorrow. So we'll see what we can squeeze in the next 20 minutes or so. First of all, Lucas, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fine, Kiyan. Thanks for having me as always. Looking forward to it.
So, the biggest story from Saturday was obviously the fact that Fede Valverde is just in God mode right now. But Real Madrid are continually winning games. I think the game against Sevilla was pretty comfortable, all things considered, bar a stretch in the second half, I would say, if you want to simplify it. Although, like Mehdi and I broke it down on Saturday night. What was your initial takeaway? What was your main takeaways? Do you want to hit me with like 2 or 3 and we can kind of break them down together? What was your main takeaway?
Valverde obviously been one of Real Madrid's best players this season, and he's in great form. Hopefully this small knock doesn't kill his momentum or anything like that, but I just think it's time for Real Madrid to earn or to get these big leads in the score, as Barcelona seem to be doing at the moment in La Liga, and just cruise for the last 70 minutes of the game or so, instead of having to find a goal late in the game, as they've been doing in recent games. Real Madrid, I'm talking about. So I don't know. It's obviously Sevilla is a tough team to beat, even though their struggles this season, but I think it will be good for Real Madrid to play full 45 minutes with great intensity in order to earn, I don't know, a 2-goal, 3-goal advantage in the score, and just cruise for the rest of the game instead of scoring one, cruise, and then trying to find a goal in the last 10 minutes as it happened in the game against Sevilla. I think it'll be a better strategy to get a comfortable lead and then cruise, rather than getting a small margin and then taking your foot off the pedal and ending up having to score or to find a goal late in the game.
I'm a little bit conflicted about that one because on one hand, I agree with you. It would be nice to just the ideal thing is to go up 3-4-0 and then sub off all the guys who need rest and just coast it out, right? And I think there hasn't necessarily been a lack of intent in some games. Like against Elche, you could have had that at halftime. You had some goals disallowed. One of them literally incorrectly disallowed, as La Liga themselves admitted. And so instead of 4-0, it could have also been like 2-1. It was weird. So, and then against Barcelona and against Sevilla, I think Ancelotti has been pretty clear that look, we also need to make sure we don't lose the game and open up and concede. So there's been a different approach in those games in terms of being more conservative. And it's funny, if you look at the difference now between this point last season and where we are now, obviously we're one of the 3 remaining undefeated teams in the top 5 leagues, along with PSG and Napoli. And this point last season, we were scoring like 3 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals, and then conceding 3 goals, 2 goals, and so we were being much more aggressive. We were trying that high press thing, and this season's been a completely different approach right off the gate, and it's worked from a result standpoint. I wonder because obviously I'd rather just win, even if it's marginal wins, rather than 3-4, 5-0 sometimes, but then drawing games, dropping points because you've opened up too much. I'd rather just win, even if it's narrow margins. But I wonder also, is this some of the sacrifice you make now just to make sure you get to the springtime in the lead? And if so, I'm okay with that. Obviously I want bigger wins too, but I can't complain too much. And so I'm conflicted about that one. I don't really care about 4 or 5 wins. If you look at the fact that Barca had the big 4-0 win over us last season, but ultimately have only won one of the last 7 Clásicos. I think if you add up all of the scores from the last few Clásicos, all these narrow wins over Barca, the aggregate score is like actually a pretty big gap, if you add them all up. So I just don't really care, I guess. I think if we weren't as deep in certain positions, I would care more. You know what I mean? Like, we're going into tomorrow's game without who? List them off: Fede, Modric,
Valverde, Modric, and Benzema. Yes.
Benzema, yeah. Obviously Ceballos too. Like tomorrow would have been a good Ceballos game, but he's not there, so it's going to be a little bit. But we also need, right now, it would be an ideal situation, as you pointed out on Twitter, Camavinga to step up, because he's had a quiet season. He hasn't been as influential. It's going to be a good game for him to step up and do some things. I guess I'm just conflicted about. I don't know if I care as much as other people about big scorelines.
But to me, it's not a matter of. I don't know if I didn't say it correctly or whatever. It's not a matter of big score lines or whatever. It's just a matter of the approach. It seems to me that Real Madrid tend to rest a little bit during games as soon as they get the lead, and then at the end of the game they have to find a goal here and there to earn the 3 points if anything happens, because the lead is obviously not big enough to score a win if you don't if you end up conceding a goal. So, and on the other hand, it's not a matter of getting 4-0 wins. It's just a matter of taking your foot off the gas a little bit later, or with a bigger margin in the score, if you will, because I think that if it doesn't happen that way, I think Real Madrid will end up losing some points, some very winnable or manageable points here and there in games that they've taken their foot off the gas with a 1-0 lead, and they end up conceding a crazy, stupid goal in the 85th minute, which obviously you might not be able to come back from. So, and this is going to be a very high scoring Liga season, in my opinion. It's just going to come down to which team drops the lesser points throughout the season, or whoever wins for example, if Madrid wins El Clásico at the Camp Nou, they're obviously in a great situation, but it will ultimately come down. I think I'm predicting a 95 or from 95-100 range season. I think both teams have enough to pretty much cruise against any given team in La Liga, especially now that teams like Sevilla and Villarreal have dropped their form quite a lot. So I think it'll be very important not to end up losing these manageable points I'm talking about, and that those points might slip away from you in certain scenarios where you don't expect them to, just because you've taken your foot off the gas too soon, in my opinion.
Yeah, you bring up great points there, and I don't know if it was you and I that had this conversation, or because there's just so many podcasts, I don't know who I talk to sometimes, who I'm having a discussion with, but I think it was around the same time that Barca were slipping in the Champions League, and then they lost Clásico. Is that are we really going to go into a 95-point league season? Are we sure that Barcelona and Real Madrid are going to sustain this form? I can't say for sure, but just based on the couple games after Clásico, where Barcelona had two strong teams, quote-unquote strong teams,
absolutely,
and just wiped the floor with them, that tells me, I think it's very possible that Real Madrid and Barcelona do go through. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect season for either team, but I actually think, we said it before the Clásico that all Clásicos matter, but this one in particular probably really matters more than most years, because this is going to be the situation. The other game I would start to maybe circle on the calendar, because they're playing a little bit better and Griezmann is playing great, is Atletico are maybe starting to become a better team as the season goes on. And that'll be another game on the calendar that you can circle as a quote unquote tough game. But I think part of the thing is that, I hate to say it because I love La Liga so much and I want them to be all strong, but right now I don't like the gap between some of these. I don't know what tier you put them in, but like the Betis, Villarreal. I think Sevilla will get better probably as the season goes on. I don't know.
Bilbao, Valencia, those teams.
They're just
you
not
have
as
to
good
expect
as
Real
like,
Madrid to win. Yeah.
They're just not as good as, relatively speaking, to the other European giants that we're gonna face. That these guys will just face. You know what I mean? And then the other thing is that, like, if Villarreal, for example, are playing a Champions League game against, or a Europa League game against Manchester United, I feel like they'll put in a better performance than they did at the Camp Nou, maybe because they'll be more extra airtight. But against Barca, they didn't have the ability to play out of a press. Their defending was terrible. And against and Athletic, it's just kind of like more of the same. These teams are not as good on the counter. Defensively, they were just bad. So I just, yeah, anyways, but long-winded way of saying, yeah, I think it's going to be these two at the top of the table with a lot of points in the springtime, and it could come down to these fine margins.
Yeah, whoever takes care of business in a better way against, in games like Getafe away, those games, you are obviously expecting a win. Ancelotti makes some rotations. It's cold during the winter. Whoever takes better care of business in those games will win La Liga, in my opinion. It will not even come down to the Clásicos or the big games against Atletico or whoever, because, I mean, if Real Madrid drop points against Atletico in the second half of the season, I can see Barcelona dropping points there too. It's just, I feel like the season will be decided by these winter night games in Getafe, or the Elches Real Madrid just beat the other day, or those smaller teams you are expected to win. These smaller teams you are making rotations for, but all of a sudden the game goes 1-1 in the 75th minute, and whoever is able to score the 3 points and win those games, I think will ultimately win the title.
With regards to also, because I'm just looking at the minute distribution this season, and this is also the case that it's not that urgent to start subbing off people in the 60th minute, because there's rotations already taking place. There's only 6 players who have cracked 1,000 minutes this season. And you're going into these games like just rotating anyway. Do you know what I mean? I just, like, this is not, last year I was much more worried about this, is what I'm saying, I guess. This year I have to say
I expected a bit more rotations against Elche, for example. The other day, I was just expecting more rotations the other day. I don't know. It's just the way it goes for me. Obviously, Ancelotti will be forced to make rotations against Leipzig because of small injuries. But, I thought Real Madrid will be comfortable enough with their bench to see a bit more, some more rotations from Ancelotti in these winnable, manageable games like the one last week against Elche, for example.
I also have some thoughts, and I wanted to throw them at you, because this morning I wrote about Tchouameni. The last couple of weeks I've started to highlight players who are not like the main storylines. Like the main storyline right now is like Fede Valverde, for example, Toni Kroos.
Yeah.
These guys are like obviously the stars of the season.
Yeah.
But last week I wrote about Rudiger. This morning I wrote about Tchouameni, just to highlight about, these guys are kind of maybe the unsung heroes. I think most people agree that Tchouameni's playing well, but I highlighted his performance against Sevilla, and just what I really noted was his amazing press resistancy. Anytime Sevilla hounded him, he was really comfortable under pressure, combined with Modric well, combined with Kroos well. Threw in some interesting stats there on the season. He leads La Liga on through balls, which is something I didn't expect. And goal creating actions, I think he's top 10. He's a player that I would have liked to have rested against Leipzig tomorrow, potentially. Playing a lot, but he probably won't now with Modric and Fede out. So how do you see it playing out tomorrow in midfield?
Yeah, I'm expecting Tchouameni, Camavinga, and Kroos starting in the midfield. Possibly Ancelotti would like to start another midfielder, but obviously he pretty much doesn't have any more other than the Castilla players, so he will probably go with Asensio on the right wing, Vinicius and Rodrigo up front. That's what I'm expecting. Obviously, if Ceballos were available, possibly Ceballos will play instead of Asensio. But since Ceballos is just not there, I think Ancelotti is pretty much forced to start Tchouameni, Camavinga, and Kroos with Asensio, Rodrigo, and Vinicius.
When you say potentially starting over Asensio, would you shift the formation to like a 4-4-2?
Yeah, I think he would go to the 4-4-2. Obviously, he wouldn't have an ideal player like Valverde to play on that spot. But yeah, I would expect a 4-4-2 with potentially Camavinga and Ceballos on the flanks. I don't know. They would probably shift during the game and all that, but I think Ceballos would be ahead of Asensio in the rotation for an away game. As I was going to say tough, I wouldn't call it tough even. I don't think it's that difficult of a game, but the fact that it's in Germany against a quality team, I think Ancelotti will probably like to start Ceballos ahead of Asensio in this particular context for this particular game. But obviously Ceballos isn't there, so he will probably be forced to start Asensio on the right wing.
Well, a couple things on Leipzig that I think make them a little bit dangerous. They're playing a little bit better now than they were earlier this season, although I haven't followed them that closely in Germany. I know they're coming off a 3-3 draw away from home this weekend. But the other thing that makes them dangerous is that they're fighting to get out of the group. Mm-hmm. And so that in itself makes them a little bit more dangerous because they're playing for something really important. And I just saw an Asensio, didn't talk too much about him other than his play against Sevilla, which is a great turn and a great pass to Vinicius.
Yeah.
This is the perfect place in the squad for Asensio. Perfect. Someone you don't rely on as a starter, but someone who can come in as what is he now? Would you say fourth? Like the right wing, he's kind of third choice. It really depends on if Rodrigo's playing in the middle, if there's an injury somewhere, but it goes basically Fede, Rodrigo, Asensio for the right wing. That's perfect for him. And he can come in with zero pressure. The game state in the second half is usually a little bit more open. Players are tired. He can play these passes. He can score these goals without pressure. This is perfect for him. This is where he is.
Yeah, but at the same time, Kiyan, I feel like he's obviously not being great by any means or whatever, but he's produced enough for him to want a better role. Yeah, I'm not saying in Real Madrid even. I feel like he's producing enough for him to say, well, if it's not here, let me show this kind of production or take this kind of production or quality elsewhere. I feel like, at the same time, he's producing enough for him to not be completely satisfied with his current role in Real Madrid. So that's the tricky part. And by the way, we have to be very, very happy or consider ourselves very lucky that Real Madrid didn't sell Asensio, because the way we're seeing the season and the roster right now, Real Madrid would have desperately needed to sign someone for that spot just because of injuries, because of obviously Hazard not being the player everyone expected him to be after what he said in Cibeles and all that. But in the end, it's kind of he's playing in a role that it's quite necessary at the moment for sure.
You know what I would say to that, Lucas? If Asensio wasn't here, my Arribas agenda gets pushed up. It's like daily articles. Yeah. More minutes for Arribas. Get him called up. But the club may not see it the way I do or we do. So it's a different subject. But you're thinking about Asensio, what leverage does he have? He can't. It's.
Oh yeah, none.
It's his last year.
Yeah, for sure.
If this is maybe too soon to talk about it, but I can ask you really quick. What percentage do you put on Asensio renewing?
Very low. I'm reading some reports from people on Twitter saying that Real Madrid have offered him an extension, which he's happy about, but his agent Jorge Mendes is encouraging him to try to find a deal elsewhere. I'm not. I don't think Real Madrid will. I don't see those tweets being entirely reliable. I don't think Real Madrid have offered him an extension just because of the last 2-3 weeks where he has produced off the bench. I think that ultimately also his goal is probably to be a big contributor for the Spanish national team. I'm not sure if he'll be that kind of player with the role he's playing in Real Madrid at the moment. So I don't know. My percentage will be 10%, 5%, depending on whether or not he's actually going to play big minutes over the next few months or weeks. For example, after the World Cup, if the roster is a bit thinner, then I can see a scenario now that he's gotten into the rotation. I can see a scenario where he plays more impactful and quality minutes over the next few weeks or months. Like, for example, if Rodrigo gets an injury right now, Asensio all of a sudden becomes an undisputed starter, I think. So I don't know if he keeps producing at a high level on that kind of role, I could see a scenario where maybe Real Madrid reconsider the whole prospect of keeping him, but ultimately I think it's a very low percentage here.
My quick take on it is that, again, and this is completely different the way the club may see it, but the season is long. There's always room for a scenario later in the season where something like that, God forbid, does happen, an injury. Asensio plays a bigger role and plays well, or he doesn't. Either way, but even if he does, I think there's a couple truths here for me that are pretty non-negotiable. If he goes to a different club, it's a downgrade to Real Madrid. That is sure. A fact. And I'm not just talking about like, oh, Real Madrid's the best team in the world, best team of all time. It's just that it's like it's going to be a tier below of team. Mm-hmm. If he wants more playing time, it's not going to be a City, Liverpool. It's not going to be Chelsea. It's not going to be, go down the list. It's not going to be any of those teams. It's a tier below. What he may get is more money, but it's probably, then you're talking about a mid-table Premier League club or something like that.
But not even that realistic, I don't think. Like if he signs for Arsenal, Wolverhampton, clubs like this, I don't think they'll pay more money than what Real Madrid are paying him at the moment.
I don't think
it's not that. Yeah.
Arsenal fans are really mad right now that you put them in the same category as Wolves. They're leading the Premier League. They're playing well.
Sure, and that's fair. But you know that a potential destination for a player like Odegaard, who couldn't find himself a role as an undisputed starter in Real Madrid, yet Arsenal were willing to give him that kind of role. I'm not sure if a team like Arsenal will give Asensio that kind of role the way they're playing right now. Probably not.
No, he wouldn't start over Saka or anyone like that.
I agree. But I don't know. The Tottenhams, these Premier League clubs, who are always, fighting. Arsenal is obviously now leading, but you know what I'm talking about, who are obviously fighting for 6, 7 in the table. I don't know if he'll get a salary raise or a better contract from them than what he has in Real Madrid at the moment. He'll probably be pretty close.
In terms of a player who is third choice right winger, and by extension third choice false 9, that player is, in some ways, Asensio is a luxury. But again, the baseline of replacing a player like that in the form of a Brahim or an Arribas is not that difficult. So we'll just see how it plays out.
I don't know. I think we are. I know what you're talking about, and I know the sentiment here. But I think Asensio is a better player now than both Arribas and Brahim. Like,
I agree with that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just don't think Brahim or Arribas would produce the same quality or the same numbers, the same statistics that Asensio is producing right now.
I agree with that. Not yet, anyway. But all I'm saying is that when you get to that low in the depth chart, you're not talking about replacing stars. You're talking about replacing role players, is my point. And so it's not, in terms of like priority, and it's not that irreplaceable of a player, is my point.
Yeah, sure. But as we said 5-10 minutes ago, those role players might actually come at hand later in the season, and maybe in those particular games we are talking about, maybe Real Madrid will like to have Asensio instead of having to play Arribas or in this case Brahim also. I think Asensio is a more reliable player than those two, and if Real Madrid needs someone to step it up in a certain context by the last third of the season or whatever because of injuries or that, Asensio is more reliable than those two. So, you're always happy to have a quality player ready to step up in those particular contexts, even though they're going to find themselves deep on the bench for most of the season.
Brahim, by the way, 4 goals in 6 Serie A games this season.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully turning into the player we thought he'd be. So
Hopefully, I'm a big Brahim fan. I thought, like last season or last 2 seasons, I thought he could actually play a role in Real Madrid on the right wing. And it's obviously his performances last season and how he fell off a little bit in Milan's depth chart. The fact that got me a little bit worried about his future in Real Madrid. I'm not sure what Real Madrid think about him in the long term. Obviously his loan deal with Milan expires next summer. I don't know what the plans are for him inside the club. I don't know what the club has in store or in mind for Brahim. In my opinion, he would be an ideal replacement for Asensio if Asensio leaves. He would be perfect. Like, I get the Arribas hype. I don't think he's as close as I don't think he's even close to Asensio's quality as much as Brahim is. I think Brahim is a definitely more finished product. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah, but you're talking like you're talking about like what is established. Asensio was established in that sense. He's proven he can score goals in big games off the bench, but I just want, like, we have to see. I mean, I don't know. Like, I also don't think Asensio has turned into the player we thought he would be. Sure. And with Arribas, we just have to see it. We have to see him at a top level to know. But yeah.
Oh yeah, but in order for you to see it, the first thing you have to do is get him out of Castilla. I mean, if you don't have those minutes, exactly. If you don't have those minutes ready for him in the first team, which I might agree with, like, the first team might be a little bit too big for him at the moment. That's why I'm advocating for Brahim to replace Asensio and not Arribas. But that doesn't mean that I want Arribas to stay in Castilla. I think already this past summer, Arribas should have left Real Madrid Castilla on a loan deal. Or a signing or transfer elsewhere with an option for Real Madrid to bring him back or whatever. But definitely we have to see what Arribas has in store in quality Primera División football before we can make a final decision on his ability. And you are not going to see that or to make that kind of judgment if he keeps playing for Castilla. So my ideal scenario would be to bring back Brahim next summer to replace Asensio. I think he pretty much replaces him perfectly. I think similar quality already right now.
Yep.
Pretty much similar style of play.
Similar profile of player.
Similar profile, similar versatility, similar ability to score, similar ability to dribble. So he's a seamless replacement for Asensio, in my opinion. And then you have to sell Arribas and with an option to bring him back, obviously, to a quality club, mid-table club in La Liga. I think that's what you have to do.
Well, Lucas, we got to go. Trying to squeeze in 20 minutes into a podcast has proven to be impossible, as predicted, but we did our best. It was a pleasure. You and I will be back on Thursday to do a mailbag. If listeners want to submit questions and also get access to that podcast, go over to patreon.com/Managing Madrid, where we are also doing a live Zoom podcast after the game tomorrow. So again, to access it, to join it, to be a part of it, patreon.com/Managing Madrid. Thanks for listening. Lucas, thanks for your time, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, no problem.
Take care, bro.
Bye-bye. You too.